Welcome to Connected, where no topic is off topic. I am your host, Kimberly Dam. Welcome to the second season of Connected. What ended up happening there? I was on such a good roll. Oh my goodness. You guys have no idea. I think I've seriously recorded that like 17 times. What I really could use, I need to learn to start planning my episodes a little bit more so that I can channel people, because you know who I would channel for that? Mr. Vincent Price. Yes, the guy that did the ending, the voice part in Thriller. God, I love that. Welcome to Connected. Welcome to the second season, and happy Halloween. I am so happy to be here. I've been looking forward to this Halloween for the past 2.5 years because of it also not only being Halloween, but it being a full moon. Because you guys know how much I dig that shit. I'm ready to do a seance just so that you can get a picture. But no joke, I've been looking forward to this Halloween for probably close to 3 years. And what's so funny is I remembered when I realized that the next one was in 2020, I was thinking, oh my God, 2020, it's like a new decade. It's going to be like the most amazing year ever. Yeah. Anyway, so today, let's get into what I have to share with you today. Today, I have an amazing episode. It's basically a compilation of some of my favorite people's favorite spooky stories. That came out really, really weird. Anyway, the first story that I have to share with you is by Roger Lockshier. Roger is an internationally recognized shaman, healer, and ritualist. With Roger having over 25 years of experience devoted to nature-centric spirituality, sacred ceremony, and a variety of esoteric, mystical, and magical traditions, you can imagine how many crazy, spooky stories Roger had to share. And me, being the spook-loving individual that I am, I wanted to hear them all. So you can imagine, you guys, how difficult it was for me to choose just one. But I did it. So without further ado, happy Halloween. Enjoy.
Well, thank you for having me on your show today, Kim. As a shamanic practitioner, I oftentimes get called when people have seemingly unexplainable events happening, maybe at their home or the residence or their business. And oftentimes I'll get called to go and do a little like investigation or do a house cleansing or blessing or things. And I've had some really unique and unusual experiences over the years. And one of them that is a real standout for me was I got a call maybe 3 years ago from a very nice couple saying that they had some unexplained things happening in their home, things moving around, things being misplaced in the home, feeling of not being alone in the house, like feeling like there's another presence there, cold spots in different areas of the house, and they're very, very scared. And not only did the couple experience this, but apparently some of their friends that have come and visited them for, just for dinner parties or whatever, had some of these experiences themselves. So it wasn't just coming from one person. This was coming from multiple people. So when I arrived at their home, this was not an old house, like kind of like the, and I hate to use the word haunted, but kind of like the idea of the classic, like old, haunted housing. This was a relatively new construction home, maybe 15 years old. But when I arrived, the house seemed quite pleasant and well kept and everything. Very nice couple living there. But as I walked around the house, there was a feeling of heaviness and sadness that it was very tangible, and it was and I wasn't picking up on any like intelligent presence, so to speak, but it just felt heavy and sad, despite the fact that there was a lot of light in the house and it was well kept and just if you saw a picture of the house, it kind of looks like your very typical middle class, nice home. But there was this sense of kind of sadness and heaviness, and they proceeded to tell me that the previous owner, there might have been some addiction issues with a family member, and there might have been some trauma there. Not any loss of life, but just maybe some aggressive behavior and things, dynamics between family members. But anyway, so we're kind of, I'm walking through the home, and I wanted to walk the property as well, because I started to feel like, I wonder if this isn't so much about this house, but it is maybe the place where the house was actually constructed. That's a possibility. And so I proceeded to walk the property line with the owners, and particularly in the back of the house, the backyard, I started to feel a real sense of anger and dread. It just felt kind of bad. And I stay away from the idea of like the good and evil paradigm, because I think that just oversimplifies things. But it did feel just, there was a heaviness and a feeling of anger. And I started to get a sense of people suffering there. It just felt like people really suffered. So I proceeded to walk the property, and then I went ahead and I started to plan to do the house blessing, which consists of saging the home and using Florida water and things like that to not only cleanse the space, but then also to bring in and invite in positive energy and intentions for the owners. So as I'm getting ready to do this, we had gone back in the house, and I'm getting my things together, and the couple's standing maybe 6 feet away from me, very close. We're just having a conversation, and I'm explaining what I'm about to do. And one of the owners, suddenly all the color ran from their face. They looked clearly shaken and looked at me with these wide eyes and said, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And I wasn't sure what they were referring to. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why do you ask?" And they said, "You're developing 4 scratches down the side of your head and face, like claw marks coming down the side of my head and face." So I said, "Quick, grab your cell phone, get a picture." And sure enough, there were 4, and the 4th one was starting to fade, but there were 3 scratch marks coming down I believe it was the right side of my face, kind of from the top of my head. I've got my head shaved, so coming down down past my eye and like towards my cheek. And what was really odd was I didn't feel it. Seeing the picture shown back to me was a little unsettling. But again, I having not felt it, I didn't feel necessarily threatened. So I went ahead and did my house cleansing and blessing, and everything worked out fine for this couple. Interestingly enough, after the fact, um, we found out that not far from where this particular home was built, actually in the same neighborhood, there was some historical research done, and there were um, slaves that had been held near this property back in the early 1800s. And so what I gathered from that was that the sadness and that heaviness that I was sensing and other people were sensing was the leftover energy of the suffering of other people. And so I'm not so sure, even though it was creepy and it was really strange, and it still gives me a little bit of goosebumps when I talk about it, having that experience. I'm not so sure the scratches were meant to harm me. It could have simply been someone trying to get my attention, because I didn't feel threatened, and there was never an instance where anyone in the family there was ever harmed. But it was this sense of sadness and heaviness and dread, and so it was an interesting experience. It's just even more interesting when you find out the history of a location afterwards, and you find out that yes, in fact, there were horrible things done to other people. Just the idea, even if these people weren't physically abused, this is the idea of being owned by another human being. It's just a horrible thought. And so whatever was left there was this feeling of sadness and grief, um, and I hope that the house blessing and things, I had heard from them a few times after, and it sounded like everything was fine. But in looking back at it, I'm not surprised that that is a leftover energy in that space, just because the human suffering that could have potentially happened there and probably did. And it's so, for me, it's like a reminder that, you know, what we do in our lifetimes and how we treat each other, how it can have an imprint and how it can leave. It goes beyond just our physical existence now. I mean, that those things can have a lasting impact, and hopefully some healing is being brought to that space. And I believe it is, to help heal that area, but it was an interesting experience either way.
Psychic medium Sheri Perbeck shares this next story.
About 9 years ago, I actually had two jobs. So I worked out of a metaphysical store, and I was pursued by a gentleman down in Carolina Beach who opened up a very eclectic store, and asked if I would do readings out of his store. And so, being new to this business as a professional, and very naive, I will say, I worked all day at the metaphysical store, and then I lived down on Carolina Beach. So when I got home, I got on my bike, rode my bike to this store, and he would sort of like, sell me out, like, pimping me out as a psychic, and, not realizing that, sometimes these beaches are obviously party time, right? People are on vacations, and so they're partying, they're doing a lot of drinking, and that stuff does not mix with doing spirit work. But anyway, so I allowed that to happen, and so I would sit outside on a picnic table and do these readings for these people. So I go home, ride my bike. And now at this point, I am absolutely exhausted and so naive that I'm not understanding that if you do too many readings, it will exhaust you. So I 12:30 at night, ride my bike home, and I go to bed. Now I'm by myself. My husband is gone for work. My son is at his girlfriend's house. I wake up about 2:30 in the morning, and my bed is shaking. And so right away, of course, I think it's one of my dogs raising hell, because he was a hell raiser like that. So I say, Skippy, stop. And so the bed stopped. So I go back to sleep. I wake up. My bed is shaking. Now shaking so bad that the headboard is legit banging up against the wall. Now I have a brass bed. So, I mean, it was making noise and everything. So I'm like, oh shit. Now I have the ability to, at will, open my third eye and see a spirit if I want to see them. If I do not want to see them, I do not have to. I will know they're there, but I've trained myself to do that. So I sit up and don't see anybody, but now I'm in such fear that I'm not even going to allow myself to see who is there. And at that time, believe me, there were a lot of spirits coming into my room, but this one was frightening me. So I right away call in Archangel Michael to protect me, and the bed stops. And so I'm like, okay, I'm good. Nope, the bed starts going like crazy. And now my dogs are awake. So I run downstairs and I start powerhousing my phone, calling my son, because he's walking distance from where he was to me. And legit, I thought I was going to die that night from a spirit that I could not let myself see. I was in the most terror I have ever felt in my life. So anyway, my son did come home. He finally answered the phone. And it's funny because the first thing he said to me was, "What did I tell you about messing with the spirits?" So I just said, "Just get your ass home. That's all I care about." Now, the poor kid has a friend in town from childhood who has no idea that I have these abilities. So, of course, they come in and he's got his friend with him. And so that was, the cat was out of the bag with that. But anyway, the next morning I called my mentors and I told them what had happened. And I'm thinking that this is a demon, right, in my house. And she reminds me that everything started from the light, everything, and to take your power back. And that was the only thing that she needed to say. And it put me at great ease. So when I went to bed that night, the next night, I'm laying in bed and here goes the bed, starts moving again. So of course I call in Michael, but see, I know now that this is a lesson for me. And I know Michael is there, but I learned to stand in my power and I sat up with absolute no fear. And I legit said, "Get the fuck out of my bedroom, out of my house. Don't ever, ever come back again, ever." And it did. It left. And so I've learned now that um, it was probably just a spirit that I picked up down on the beach who was trying to feel fulfilled in whatever made him happy or her happy while she was here in the physical, But it was a very scary experience and have not had one like that since because once you learn something, it's simple. It's time to move on to another experience. So.
The next two stories I have to share are by Doug and Jane Anderson, the co-founders of Port City Paranormal. This husband and wife team was so much fun to sit down and talk to about their experiences and stories running an organization that provides assistance to those that may be experiencing paranormal activity. I can honestly tell you, not only did they have such interesting, compelling stories, but I honestly just loved their passion so much that I'm pretty sure at one point I begged them to let me come along on their next case. And I'm really hoping, really hoping I get an invite soon. But anyway, here's their story. Enjoy.
This one, I was not actually on a paranormal investigation. I was driving home from New York on a winter night, There was ice and snow on the ground, and I stopped at the first rest center in North Carolina, and I was going to get a coffee at the vending machine because it was like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And as I'm walking towards it, I see this guy come out of the darkness. And me being suspicious, I kind of stopped in my tracks, and he kept coming. I can describe him. He was about, maybe 6'2", very pale blonde hair, pale skin, black leather jacket, and jeans. And I started walking back towards the vending area, and he says, "Are you heading south?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Be careful at mile marker 125. Just be careful." And he walked to the other side of the vending area and out the other side. Well, I kind of followed him to see where he was going, and there was nobody there, and there were no cars parked there, and there were no footprints in the snow. So at mile marker 125, as I was going south, I came over the rise, and it was nothing but black ice. And there was a car upside down on the side of the road.
This story's a little closer to home. The house that Doug and I live in right now, I bought off my parents. And all the backyard, I look out the backyard and I see my father because he planted this tree and this tree. And just some of them aren't doing too good. He called the Dogwoods Volunteers because they just pop up anywhere they want. So one nice Saturday afternoon, Doug was outside trimming the backyard up. And there's this one tree, dogwood, it was on its last leg. And so he decided to cut that down. While he was outside working, I was back in my office, which is 2 rooms away, doing PCP work. And I heard Doug's phone start ringing. And he had placed it on a shelf right near the back door, and it rang, and it rang, and it rang, and it rang some more. Like, come on, I thought, go to voicemail. So finally I got up, and I know it wasn't, I don't know, I got up, and Doug was just coming in the back door, and I said to him, "Here, it's for you." And by the time you opened it up, there was nobody on the line. And then he checked voicemail. And let me see if I can get this right. When Doug played it back, we couldn't hear anything, just some garbled hiss, or it just wasn't anything that made sense. But being part City Paranormal, Doug took it and ran it through his EVP programs. And he listened to it really carefully. And Doug says, "You got to come hear this. You got to come hear this." And from out of nowhere, my dad was saying, "Damn it, I love that little tree." My father had passed about 5 years before. He's never used a cell phone. It was just, I don't know what to say. It was kind of spooky. I had a flip phone, so I know I didn't dial it, but it was my phone coming, So we know that Dad's here watching us. And Dad called us another time. Dad called us again, and it called Doug's cell phone again. He was coming home from the hospital work, and his cell phone started ringing, and it rang and rang. Finally, it went to voicemail. And when he came in the house, he played the message back, and it was the same old garbled stuff like that. So he puts it through his programs, and I hear my dad's voice again out of the past saying, "Jane loves you, Doug." And I do.
The next story I have to share is by Becky. Becky found a little something upstairs. Enjoy.
I went to this house and I shouldn't have gone in because as soon as I walked onto the front porch, I knew something was wrong with it. But I said, no, you're being silly. Just go in. So I go in and the house, it was sad. It was heavy and sad. And sometimes I think I'm just being crazy. So I just blew it off again. And the owner of the house, I said, can I go look around? And he said, sure, have at it. So I'm walking around because I love history. I love old houses. So I'm walking around this house and I go to the stairs. And as I'm going up the stairs, the sadness just gets heavier. Okay. And it weighs on me. And I started to cry a little bit. It was so, so heavy and so sad. And sometimes when you have that sort of feeling, it really feels like you're walking through, I call it a wall of jello, because you have to push, against it to move forward. So I get to the top of the stairs, and again, big old farmhouse. And the top of the stairs, there's a landing. Straight ahead of me, there's a bathroom, and I can see a claw tub. To the left, there's a bedroom that I can see, and then to the side of the stairs, there's a bedroom. To the right, it's the same design. So there's 4 bedrooms upstairs. The bedroom to the left, and I've never told this story because it's horrifying, had this creature, and that's all I can think to call him. He was all the way to the ceiling. And I couldn't tell what he had at his feet. My brain kind of my imagination filled in holes. But to be honest, I couldn't tell what he had, if he had feet at all. And he kind of leaned forward and he had his arms stretched out to the side and he was just staring at me. And then to the right, there was a male in the bedroom telling me that he wanted to come out, but he couldn't because of the thing to my left. And then straight ahead in the bathtub was a girl. She didn't know that she was dead yet. She had passed away in the bathtub. She had committed suicide in the bathtub and was waiting to die. She didn't know that she had succeeded. So that's horrifying. And I don't like telling that story because the thing that was to my left, I saw him again in another place. I don't like acknowledging him. I don't know what he was. If I acknowledge him, is he going to come back? So that's one I've never told anyone. I saw him again when we were looking for a house to buy. I found a house on the internet that was for sale. My daughter and I went by myself to look at it. I couldn't even get out of the car because he was standing in the living room. I never told my partner about that house because I wouldn't go near it. So there's no point in telling him.
Christy shares this story.
When I was 18, I was working in a daycare, and it was wintertime. And a lot of the kids didn't want to go outside because it was a cold day. Only 5 kids wanted to go outside. So I brought 5 out, and there was this layer of ice on top of deep snow. And my boots kept crunching through the snow, but because the kids were lighter, they were able to run on top of it. And I couldn't keep up with the kids as fast as they were going. And I kept counting 6 kids. And the 6th kid, he had red snow pants on. All the other kids had black snow pants. Every time I tried to catch up to him, I couldn't. One of the kids would interrupt me and say, like, I lost my mitten or I lost my boot, help me. And I could not see this kid's face. I kept seeing only the back of him. He'd go behind a tree, he'd go through the tunnel, behind the slide, behind the swings, behind another tree. And like, no matter how hard I tried, I could not keep up with him. And I almost got close enough to grab him. I almost grabbed his boot, but he went through the tunnel. And so I just got frustrated. I called all the kids back together because I didn't want there to be a kid missing or unaccounted for. And all the kids lined up. There's only 5 kids that lined up. They all had black snow pants on. I was like, "Where's the kid with the red pants?" And they're like, "I don't know." And we go inside, and I let the supervisor know. So she went through all their lists, and none of the kids were missing. And she said, "We don't have any kids here that have red snow pants. They all have black or navy blue snow pants." And there was like a tall gate around fence in the area around the daycare to keep, the kids from getting into the road or anything like that. So I don't know how there was another kid. Like, it couldn't have been a neighborhood kid because I would have seen him climb over the fence or something like that. So it was just unexplainable.
Sarah shares this story.
So my spooky story happened about 10 years ago when my husband at the time and I were living in this little tiny yellow house, and it used to be an ice house back in like the 1800s. So it has lots of history. I don't really know any of the stories, but anyways, one night I woke up out of a dead sleep to this shadow figure standing in the doorway to our bedroom. And I had the door open and the hall light was on, so it was kind of weird. But so this shadow figure looked like an elf to me, but whatever. It was dark shadow, and it came walking towards me, and went through me and kind of tugged at me or my soul. And then when it got to the middle of the bed, it left my body. And then it started walking through my ex-husband at the time, was my husband. It started walking through him, but it it was almost like I could see his soul getting pulled out, kind of like in movies when they show out of body experience. So the shadow figure was walking through and actually pulled his soul with him for quite a ways until he got on the opposite side of the bed, and then his soul bounced back like a rubber band. It was kind of really weird. And then the shadow figure went on the other side of the bed, down to the other corner of our room, next to our closet. And next to the closet, I had a pretty tall shelf. Well, the shadow figure got up on top of the shelf and just kind of perched there, like I don't know, a monkey would perch on a tree or something. I don't know. He kind of just perched up on top of the shelf and like stared at me, and it freaked me out. And that particular corner was pretty dark, so he kind of blended in with the rest of the darkness. And so I had to put a light on in order to fall back asleep to get rid of the darkness, so there was no shadows. And for the whole rest of the time living there, I always felt like a presence. I never saw him again, but I could never sleep with the lights off after that. Not until a few years after moving out of there. So that's my spooky story.
The last story that I have to share is again by Doug Anderson. Doug is just such a great storyteller, and honestly, he had so many that it was really difficult for me to just pick one. So I decided to throw this one in because, I don't know, it just holds a special place in the Cape Fear River.
Well, this one took place on the battleship USS North Carolina. Being a paranormal investigator, we've done 27 investigations on the ship, and none of them have disappointed me. This one night, I guess it was about 3 hours into the investigation, and everybody had gone upstairs to take a break. And I went down to where I had a recording set up for video in what they call the officers' country. It's all the little staterooms that the officers get to sleep in privately. And I had these DVR recorders, and I had to change the disc. Of course, you're not really supposed to go by yourself. That's our rule. But I broke the rule. And I went down to the find the device and put a new disc in. And while I was kneeling down, I heard a big thump further and deeper into the ship. And I said, And then I heard what sounded like somebody dragging something very heavy. And I started getting a little nervous. And then I hear footsteps and more dragging, and it's coming closer, and it's getting closer. And I'm thinking to myself, what if this is a stowaway and it's a human being and he's dragging a body? This is my thought process. Not that it's a ghost, that it's a real person. So I said, screw this. I dropped the disc on top of the recorder and ran.
That concludes all the stories that I have to share this time. I want to thank all of my guests, Doug and Jane Anderson, Roger Lockshier, Sheri Perbeck, and many others anonymously unknown. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, if you could just give me a rating and maybe a review, I'd greatly appreciate it. In addition, if you have any topics that you would like me to discuss in the future, please feel free to drop me a line at connectedpodcast.us@gmail.com. Other than that, you guys, I hope you are well and that you stay connected. Bye, guys.